Hey there, powerful soul. Thank you for tuning in for this impromptu conversation. If you are here for the recording of this, I would love to hear from you and know that your presence was here. And that would mean a lot if you could let me know that you graced this recording with your presence. And this is an unscripted conversation. This is an unplanned conversation. I have been in between sessions. I had a private client session and taking a mini break with some cha before I have the 2026 Thailand retreat informational call in about an hour or so. And I had this thought that I wanted to contemplate with you in real time around the illusion of scarcity when you are actually living in abundance. And so this conversation is for a certain type of person, a certain human, a certain woman, where living in struggle or struggling to pay your bills, this is not that conversation for you. This is a conversation for someone who's not struggling. This is a conversation for someone who is able to keep up with their standard of living and they live in a different reality. And it's important for me to say that so that those who may be in a different space in their lives can understand that this conversation could be activating. And if you're not ready to hear certain things, then to take some self-responsibility in how you listen to the conversation. It tickles me when I think about past versions of myself and how I showed up in different seasons of my life. And I feel deep compassion for those past versions of myself when I showed up in ways that were disempowering, when I showed up in ways that were dysfunctional, when I showed up in ways that were disharmonious to the reality that I was actually experiencing in real time. But because I was in a different paradigm, because I was in a different level of consciousness, because my nervous system was still attuned to the past rather than to what was actually happening and what I was co-creating, I had challenges with having peaceful and empowering and being very present with the reality that I was having in real time, being able to take in the abundance and actually somatically feel it and feel the gratitude for it. It's interesting because last week I facilitated inside of a Qigong community that I'm both a student and an apprentice teacher in. We did a whole nearly 90-minute The Power of Gratitude teaching and somatic activation and sing and breathe and pray and all the things. It was beautiful. And I have been living with this theme of gratitude ever since that facilitation, and how gratitude wasn't always a consistent frequency and emotion and paradigm I could touch and allow it to touch me back because I was still so deeply immersed in survival mode. And I had a very distorted perspective around what survival mode meant. I thought survival mode meant that I was struggling and couldn't pay my bills, that I was probably on welfare or living in subsidized housing or homeless. I had this distorted viewpoint of survival mode and thought that, well, there's no way I could be in survival mode because that's not my reality. I was aware that much to know. I had enough awareness to know that that's not my reality. So there's no way I could be in survival mode. What I was completely unaware of was how our brains and our body could be in survival mode, even though our present reality is not appearing to be in survival. That was such an interesting concept to learn. One moment. Cheers. That was such an interesting concept for me to learn. And when I learned that concept, it blew my mind that my brain and my body can be having a different experience than what my present reality is. That was something, hey there, Christine. That was something that when I learned of this, my mind was blown. Have you ever heard something, whether if it was a story or information, and it feels like you were in a dark room and somebody turned the light on, and you're like, where have I been all my life? And so I'm hearing this information, my mind is blown, and now I'm realizing that I actually had a very abundant life, but that there was a different version of myself that was experiencing the reality I was having now. And it was the version of myself that was once in survival. It was a version of myself that was once getting it out the mud and was having to grind and hustle because of the childhood I had and because of the environment that I grew up in, and because I was eventually a single mama and was the sole financial provider for me and my son, and because I had certain standards, I wanted to provide a certain quality of life for him. And so when I was in those different experiences, I didn't realize what was happening to my brain and body, that it was literally being wired for survival. I had no idea. I had no idea that that's what was happening. What I thought was happening was I was just doing what I had to do to get by in life. I didn't know that I was also collecting identities and paradigms and programming and patterns along the way that was going to shape who I was being inside of my life, inside of my business, inside of my leadership, inside of my relationships, that was actually going to turn into sabotage later down the line. And so when I started to recognize this showing up in my life, it was 6 years ago when my beloved, the Mister, and I relocated from Illinois to Florida. And I was doing what I do best. I wanted to live in the best of the best. He said, pick wherever you want to live. And I said, I want to live in this luxury townhome gated community. And that's where we went. And it was beautiful. They had 2 clubhouses and 2 pools and all the amenities. And it was a beautiful apartment. And I remember I couldn't appreciate it. I remember I couldn't feel grateful for it. I remember I felt this is not enough. This is not good enough. This is too small. I want it bigger. Like I just kept going into the lack of my experience. And I remember I was working with the late Bob Proctor about 5 years ago, and we were having a conversation. He taught about vibration and frequency, and we were having a conversation about gratitude and our attitude. And I realized that my attitude was quite terrible. I had a terrible attitude. I was complaining about a reality that I once prayed for. I was complaining about a reality that I once asked God for. I was complaining about a reality that I asked my husband to co-create with me. And when that awareness came online that I was living in survival mode, what I started to notice was, before I could be grateful for the awareness, I actually felt guilty that I was experiencing myself in that way. And so I'm sharing this because I believe that when we are navigating and ascending in our levels of consciousness and awareness as feminine leaders, we have to be aware of the initial emotion that we are experiencing when we become aware of who we're being within an experience. And my initial emotion, the initial sensation, the initial felt sense I had within myself of how I was observing myself being ungrateful, complaining, being in survival mode and didn't even know it, was guilt. I felt bad. And what I realized was beneath that was survivor's remorse. I don't know if you've ever heard of that phrase before, but survivor's remorse is a phrase that has been cultivated, created, and used for people who have survived certain types of experiences that other people who were in the exact same experience did not survive or did not overcome. And so then I started thinking about the people that I grew up with. I started thinking about my younger siblings. I started thinking about my parents. I started thinking about anybody who had a similar life that I had, but was having a different reality than me. And I started to feel bad about that. I started to feel bad that, oh man, well now who am I to be experiencing abundance? And who am I to be experiencing these answered prayers? And who am I to be experiencing this reality and this life that I co-created and I asked God for it and I worked for it, I still couldn't touch the gratitude. It was just guilt and shame and feeling like, oh my gosh, I just still couldn't touch the gratitude. I just was spiraling in the wrong direction. I'm so glad that this is something you can relate with. And what really started to support me was I had to find my center within myself first. I had to find my center within myself. And oftentimes as modern day high achievers, I have found this interesting pattern where many high achieving women tend to overthink and underfeel, meaning they live in their head a lot and they're disconnected from their body temple. They're disconnected from their vessel because it works for us as high achieving beings. It's how you are able to create the successes you've been able to create. It's how you've been able to achieve. It's how you've been able to accomplish. It's how you've been able to get things done. However, there becomes a point inside of your consciousness, inside of your identity, where that will stop serving you. That will stop serving you. And at some point, you're going to have to cross over the bridge from your head into your body temple so that you can feel somatically what is happening in your body, in your experiences, so that you're not resulting to past paradigms, past patterns, and instead you're actually in our original design and our original nature, which is being a co-creator with God, co-creating heaven on earth, co-creating our desires, co-creating our destiny, co-creating new realities, which I believe that's what we've been called and created to do as feminine leaders and powerful souls. I believe people that are connected with me here and feel called to work with me, that's what we've been called and created to do, to co-create new realities on this planet. And we can't do that when our brain and our body is in the past. We can't do that when our brain and body is trapped at different ages and phases and stages of our life. And it starts to pull our energy away from us. And we start to realize that our energy is feeling depleted. Our energy is feeling like it's dimming down. We start to feel less vibrant, less radiant, less alive, with less vigor. And that's where that creativity comes from. That creativity comes from aliveness. That creativity comes from vigor. That creativity comes from feeling in our center. Feeling in our center. So I'm having these conversations with the late Bob Proctor when I was working with him 5 years ago, and he's talking about all these things. And I'm at the time living in my head still, disconnected from my body. And I remember he was talking about feeling the vibration of gratitude, and it felt like a foreign language. I couldn't feel it. I could feel the guilt. I could feel feeling bad. But I couldn't feel the gratitude. And I was like, man, this is nuts that this is where I'm at. And so the first thing I had to do is I had to stop judging myself for that was just what I was experiencing in that time. I had to rewire that inner dialogue of feeling bad that I couldn't touch this vibration that he was suggesting was going to support us in our co-creations. And I had to come to a place, I like to call this a compassionate presence. I had to come to compassionate presence within myself, being in my center, and stop judging the way that I was experiencing myself and my experiences, and just become the observer. Go back to the seat of the observer and just observe. Without judgment, without attaching myself to these unconscious paradigms and crippling beliefs, and just observe it. And over time, I started to recognize what version of myself was showing up and which version of myself was starting to play this patty cake game with the past and the present. And over time, I've been able to deepen into this awareness of being here in the present and being conscious of what I'm wanting to create moving forward. And so being able to be grateful for what's happening right here, that I'm living in a reality I once prayed for, that I'm living in answered prayers, that I am living in abundance. Abundance, in my humble opinion, is our original nature. It is our original design by our maker. All we have to do is go outside and look in nature, and nature models to us who we are and how we get to live and who we get to be. And the frequency of abundance is in us. It is who we are by nature. When I go outside, I'm looking right now, my neighbor has a tree in their backyard, and I can see the plentiful of leaves, and I have a grapefruit tree in the back of our yard, and there's tons of fruit that's been growing on there. That's abundance. When I go out into nature, into the woods, and I go for a walk, and I see all the insects, and I see all the critters, and I see the birds and all the different animals, and then I see all the different types of plants and all the different fruit trees and all the different creations that are present, I'm reminded of abundance. I believe the distortion in this modern civilization, I don't even want to call it civilization, modern society has been that abundance is the accumulation of more stuff. That abundance is the accumulation of more stuff. And I remember when I was inside of this business mastermind, and part of this business mastermind was we went to this business retreat, and part of the experience was to have a full day on a yacht. And I remember I told my peers who are out earning me by millions, because I haven't touched that yet. I know I will, but I haven't touched it yet. She says, great catch between civilization versus society. Yes, I'm big on course correcting my language. And I shared with them, we were having a conversation about what does luxury mean to you? And what does abundance mean to you? And I remember at that time I had started to evolve beyond the survival mode, and I was in a different awareness of myself, and I was starting to have a different experience with these different vibrations and frequencies. And I flat out told I'm just going to be transparent, y'all. This is just me being me. I straight up told these multi-millionaire white folks on a yacht that this to me is cool and all, but when I feel most abundant and when I feel most luxurious is when I'm in the woods. I sure did. Because that's my truth. That is what resonates with my soul. And so what I had realized was I was actually creating a reality that I thought was supposed to make me feel abundant. I wanted that luxury townhome because that is the image I bought into unconsciously through all the marketing and the messaging that my life needed to look a certain way. And granted, I do love luxury. I do love beauty. And I also have this other side of me. I am a mystic. I am a shamanic woman. I love being out in nature. I need to be in nature. That's what fuels my soul. That's what makes me feel closest to God. And so I had to redefine what abundance meant for me and stop trying to create abundance based off of what other people said abundance should look like and what other people were modeling as abundance. And I had to connect to, well, what does it feel like for me to live an abundant reality? What does it look like for me to live in abundance? How does that feel for me? And that's when I started to be able to touch gratitude. And so what I recognized was I wasn't able to be grateful for the reality because deep down, I was living somebody else's dream. I was living somebody else's reality of abundance. I hadn't actually connected to what does abundance truly mean for me? And so when I started to play with that conversation, that's when things really started to open up for me. I started to notice, you know what? Abundance for me is spaciousness in my schedule, white space on my calendar, feeling I have room and space in my days to just be. Everything's not something on a to-do list. So I got to check this off, check that off. I started to feel, abundance is being able to receive the way my husband loves me in the moment and not go into this critical, high achiever, codependent, controlling, it needs to look like this and sound like that, and just be able to receive the way he's loving me in that moment. Abundance for me looks like being able to go out in nature and experience creator's creation and see the divine supernatural intelligence, it brings me to a state of awe and wonder when I see that this infinite creator created all that is. My mind can't even fathom that level of creativity. And so I had to start reconnecting with what abundance means for me, and then rewire myself somatically, rewire my patterns unconsciously, and recode my identity to be in alignment with what I was actually wanting to create in this new reality that I was calling in. And so I say that this conversation started off as the illusion of scarcity, because when we really think about what it means to be scarce, can we not feed ourselves? Can we not clothe ourselves? Can we not have housing? And really getting to the basics of what does it really mean to be scarce? And then look at the reality that we actually have. Now, there was a time in my childhood where that was a real, true reality. And I actually shared this on a peer and a former client, Christine Lucan, has a podcast. And she shared yesterday that the podcast episodes that I recorded with her were some of the top listened podcasts. And I was like, oh my gosh. And I just find this so fascinating. But during those episodes, I had shared my childhood, and the scarcity was a real experience in my childhood. Scarcity was a real experience when I was a 19-year-old pregnant, soon to be single mom. So I did experience scarcity. The challenge was that I never learned how to be with my experiences in an empowered way until later in life, when I wanted to live out my destiny and I wanted to co-create the calling God placed inside of my life. I wanted to live a different type of life, and I wanted to have different experiences in my relationships, and I wanted to lead from my feminine and not from this hustle, grind, high achiever mode. That's when all this stuff started to really face me in front of me, and I could look at it. And I started to recognize where scarcity was sharing a story with me that I never got to be with. And when I learned how to be with the story that scarcity was trying to communicate to me, without shaming it, without judging it, without suppressing it, without numbing it, without trying to hide from it, without trying to pretend like it's not whispering in the crevices of my unconscious, and actually listen, then I was able to rewire it and be with it in a new way and start to look around, and my perception, the filter that was over my eyes, was removed, and I could actually see clearly. And when we can see clearly, when we can perceive through the lens of truth, not perceive through the lens of our paradigms, not perceive through the lens of our patterns, not perceive through the lens of our programming or these different parts of ourselves, but perceive through the lens of truth, that is when everything opens up for us. That is when we can actually see. And I believe that in that state of beingness, then we can feel the abundance. And when we can touch that feeling and start to master how to stay and remain in that feeling, that's when I believe we'll start to experience heaven's harvest. And we'll experience heaven on earth in this lifetime. And in whatever way that looks like for you. As I shared, it gets to look different for everyone. This whole thing around everybody got, live the same type of life is garbage. It's no different than how everyone is starting to look alike. I see women, I'm about to go on a whole tangent here, but y'all just bear with me. Nothing burns me more than seeing performative femininity. I call it faux femininity. And the reason I say that is because I believe as feminine beings, we are so beautiful in our uniqueness. We are so beautiful in our originality. We are so beautiful in the way that God created us. And it really hurts my heart when I see so many women look alike, because they went and got these filters and injections, and they're doing all these things because they think that's the standard of beauty. They think that's the standard of how they should look. And to me, that's almost a scarcity mentality. Because what is the outcome that they're trying to accomplish with that? Get a man, make more money? That's scarcity. I need to distort the way that I look to get this outcome. So I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole right now. She says, everyone looking alike. It is so weird and dystopian, so disconnected from real life. Yes. Yes. I'm not going to keep going down that rabbit hole because I can go for days about that. Okay. I'm not going to do that today. I want to stay focused here. Go back to what I was sharing about abundance. All of this to say, to wrap this up and bring this to a close. Cheers. Abundance is so simple. More than enough. More than enough. More than enough. She says another day, though. I may have to come back and do a riff on that because, yeah, I have actually worked with women who had different types of procedures scheduled, whether if it was plastic surgery or enhancements. And as a result of our work together, they canceled those appointments. And so I just wish more women would find me so that they would stop doing this to themselves. I had women remove their breast implants after working with me because they found out they had what's called breast implant illness. And they realized that the root cause of them getting those breast implants was not empowering. And that the reason they got those breast implants was from distortion. And so, yeah, I have stories for days about that whole arena. I'll do that on another day. She said, would love your insight on it. I'll definitely contemplate it and have to come back. Because I do believe there's some scarcity there, even with people doing that. And I believe it's this, either the man or the money. That's what it comes down to, wanting the man or the money. So coming back to abundance, the simplest way that I have learned to touch gratitude with abundance is to be grateful beyond my needs getting met and then looking at where there's more than enough. And when I feel that somatic sensation and frequency of more than enough and recognizing that is abundance in and of itself, then the next phase is just holding on to that frequency. So I had no plans on doing this today. So I thank you all for indulging me in this conversation. And if you are in a space of wanting to recode your own identity and recalibrate who you're being inside of your life, love, and leadership, and you're ready to be she who has and holds it all with embodied peace, power, and presence, then you can reach out and I can share what I have open and available right now. I have some things I've been working on behind the scenes for quite some time. I've been restructuring, reordering. She says, I love this discussion. I'm so glad. Thank you for your presence. Restructuring, reordering, recreating, all the things. So in due timing, I'll share what's coming here. So, excuse me. Thank you so much for your presence. Thank you for being here. Love to hear any takeaways around what came up for you about abundance. I know we didn't go too deep in it. So I'm taking my second walk of the day and feel so abundant. Oh, I love that. See, that's beautiful. I love that. Yeah, share any takeaways of what came up for you for this abundance chat. There's so much more I could go into. If you want me to go more into it, I can. But yeah, I just felt it was alive in my heart to come and connect with you. So thank you for your presence, and I'll chat with you next time. Take care now.